Great, and we are live. Hey, hi everyone. Hi Julia,
Hey.
hailing from Nelson, sunny Nelson, and we have also Charlotte, another licensed advisor at New Zealand Shores. Thanks for your time, Charlotte.
Hello.
Hey, and my name is Fabian. I'm also a licensed advisor at New Zealand Shores. So as New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a big announcement yesterday, we thought it would be a good time to give everyone an update on where things are at with COVID-19, New Zealand, and everyone's migration plans. Following this long-awaited announcement, New Zealand has eased its lockdown to level 1 at midnight last night, which is very much normal life within our borders as of this morning. The decision actually just comes 3 weeks after entering level 2 lockdown. It also comes 17 days without a new case and just 1 day after having 0 active cases recorded. I was reading this morning that New Zealand's actually just, it's one of just 9 countries with no active COVID-19 cases in the world. Now, every country might have their own lockdown levels, but you can easily guess that a level 1 effectively means 0 restrictions on our day-to-day life and business. So Julia, is this really now life as per normal from this morning?
Yeah, essentially it is. It's a kind of a new normal, but it means that we have domestic travels now permitted, so we can fly or drive around New Zealand again. There's no restriction on public gatherings, so that's allowing sporting events to happen again, concerts and larger family events such as weddings, which is great news. And we're encouraged, though, to maintain social distancing where possible and continue with the basic hygiene and hand washing, just to be super cautious and not to introduce the virus back out there again. They're also recommending that we continue with the contact tracing. So if there is any new cases that come up, we can easily be contacted. And the Ministry of Health have got a special app that you can download to your phone for that.
Right, okay. So that's within New Zealand, within our borders. But what about the border restrictions that are in place currently, Charlotte? Any progress on that?
Yeah, so the change of level doesn't actually necessarily reflect a change in the border situation. At this stage, our border is still closed to everyone but returning New Zealand citizens and residents, as well as a limited number of exceptions. So healthcare staff, there is limited numbers of economic exceptions as well. So we had the Avatar film crew turn up last week because obviously they will be of huge economic benefit to New Zealand and they will employ New Zealanders in the course of their production. We do know that the borders will be a weak point from now on. So priority will most definitely be for New Zealand carefully managing that border. It may come as a bit of a disappointment that level 1 doesn't mean reduced border restrictions. For a lot of people listening, it's definitely a disappointment for us, but we do know that an easing of restrictions will come. It's just a matter of time. So we do understand that the border will be reviewed by the New Zealand Parliament in the near future. And our Immigration Minister also announced in an interview today that they will be working on initially partners of New Zealand citizens and residents who haven't yet previously entered New Zealand. So they'll be allowing them to return either with or without their partner. So that's a big step forward. And then they are also working on work visa holders. So that's people who have either already been living and working in New Zealand but are now stuck offshore when the border's closed, or people who have had work visas issued. So we do know there's progress being made. We just obviously don't have an exact date on it, but it's really promising that they're starting to talk about it in the media as well.
Right. We have a comment here on Facebook about someone who had a work visa approved days before the border closure. And obviously there's an activation date of usually 3 months on that visa. And the concern is, of course, the date lapses before the person's able to enter the country. So as we understand, Immigration New Zealand's still working on this. And the Parliament bill that was recently passed may allow to bulk update or prolong these activation dates. Julia, do you think the borders will remain shut for an indefinite period of time? What are we looking at realistically?
No, I don't think they will. There are those exemptions to the travel ban that have been there since the beginning of lockdown, that does allow the certain type of work visa holders to come in, or workers to come in. But I mean, they have been working on what they're calling the travel bubbles, which will ease restrictions and allow flights from particular countries that have got the virus under control. That's still being talked about, focusing mainly on the Trans-Tasman bubble with Australia initially. But there's no kind of time frame on that. There's a lot of things they're still trying to work out with, so that they don't have to quarantine people on each end. Otherwise, it doesn't make their short holiday worthwhile if they've got to spend 14 days in quarantine. So they won't remain shut for an indefinite period. It's just we don't have a timeline on when they're going to reopen them.
Right, so the first bubble being with Australia, obviously, and then expanding to some countries. So that's it, just 2-3 countries we can fly to New Zealand from?
Initially, I guess they've just got to monitor on how the virus is being controlled in other countries before they look at which countries they're actually going to allow back in. And maybe that will be the East Asian countries after Australia. So, and maybe even the Pacific Islands.
Right, okay. So, Charlotte, essentially what we're dealing with is a step-by-step approach, expanding the national bubble over to the nearest countries and then possibly a Pacific/Asian New Zealand bubble. Why do you think the government is adopting that step-by-step approach?
So we're now COVID-free, virtually for now. So the border is definitely New Zealand's weak point. It is the main concern for obviously the virus actually returning back into New Zealand. So free travel obviously would mean that anyone could enter as they wish, and those people pose a risk. So they are at the moment implementing systematic testing at the border. So everyone who arrives will undergo testing within 3 or 4 days after they arrive, and then again at day 12. They also have to go into either a managed isolation or into quarantine, depending on whether they're showing any COVID symptoms or not. They've got these facilities currently in Auckland, Christchurch and Wellington, and they have a capacity at the moment to have 3,000 people at any given time in those facilities. So a main factor at the moment of slowly, step by step, allowing more people to enter is, I think they have to actually logistically figure out how they are going to start quarantining a lot more people. Obviously tourism's taken a hit, so there are a lot of hotels around it, but I guess it's just a conversation that the government's having to have with those hotels and how they manage it and logistically how that works. And saying this, there's also been a lot of pressure from various industries in New Zealand to reopen our borders to let workers and students in. New Zealand's small, we rely on migrant workers, and we also rely on international students to inject a huge amount of money into our economy. So hopefully with the pressure that's building towards the government, that we start to see things happening a little bit faster. And we've just got to the end of being in a very reactive phase. So we've been reacting to the situation that we're in terms of the virus and controlling it in New Zealand. But now that it's definitely under control, I think we're in a position where the government can start looking at next steps forward.
And I got recent feedback from recruiters that the job market is clearly picking up again. So it's really a matter of finding a safe way to reopen those borders progressively for workers and students alike. So to close off, can you perhaps share your recent experiences with Immigration New Zealand from an advisor perspective? Are they at full capacity now? Have you had visas approved recently? Any luck with your request to travel to New Zealand? Julia?
Well, requests to travel have not been that great. Haven't had many that have actually been approved under that exemption. Residency, I've seen moving. I've had resident visas approved this week, which is good, but that was for some onshore people. that met the prioritisation level, so that was good. Job offers are still trickling in, so that the employment market is moving, so we're able to lodge stuff. Yeah, so I think the ones that I followed up with this week have all been quite good, apart from the travel exemption. Not had much success with that this week.
Right. Okay. And just the residence applications that you got approved, any idea of, well, of course, but can you give us a hint as when they were lodged roughly? So that gives a time frame.
Yeah, the one was lodged in October 2019, would have met the high income bracket to have got priority processing from an onshore applicant. The other one is an onshore with occupational registration. So that one's obviously in the faster track. And I think that one was lodged at January 2020. So that one's moving through quite quickly.
Yeah, that one has. Okay. Charlotte, any feedback from your end?
Yeah, I've also had one residence application approved since Immigration New Zealand moved to level 2, which was when their processing capacity drastically increased. That was actually also lodged early January this year, and also met the fast track requirements for occupational registration. So yeah, it did process a lot faster. Reality is, if you don't meet that fast track requirements, you are facing a much longer wait. So hopefully people don't hold us to the fact that we've just said you can lodge an application in January and get it approved 4 or 5 months later. In terms of exceptions to travel, I have had 2 nurses granted exceptions to travel, one coming from Europe and one coming from Australia. So that's been really positive. We have also had, I've had one partner of a New Zealand citizen with a New Zealand citizen child. He was offshore working, family was still in New Zealand, and he was allowed to enter through that exemption application as well. And I have actually just had one family where the principal applicant is here in New Zealand working, and the rest of the family was in South Africa, and they have been invited to apply for a visitor visa for an exemption to enter, but we haven't yet got an approval on it. So it is a 2-stage process. Yes, they can say, we invite you to apply for an exemption to enter, but that doesn't mean it'll be approved. So we're still waiting on the outcome of that one. But I think, yeah, as we start moving forward, Jacinda Ardern has said that the goal is to reunite families. So we will definitely see more of those being approved in the near future as well.
Okay, great, thank you. We have time for a couple of questions that have popped on the chat there. What is the rough lead time on visa variations for onshore applicants? So that's usually in the case where you're currently employed here, you get a job from another employer and you like to vary the conditions on your work visa to work for the new employer. At the moment, we've seen some pretty quick decisions on these. I personally have had a couple approved right after lockdown. So as soon as they got to someone's desk, they got approved that same day. But in general terms, we are looking at 3 to 4 weeks for VOCs. Will you guys back that up?
Yeah, definitely 3 to 4 weeks at least in normal processing times.
Okay. Thanks, Charlotte. Another question from Brenda. Will residency visas be prioritized? As Julia hinted at, there is now a formal prioritization process, and the 2 main criteria are occupational registration and what Immigration New Zealand deems being a high income, which is currently sitting at just over $106,000 per annum. Any other question? What about documents that have expired during lockdown, like police clearance? Would a new document be required? What do you think, Charlotte?
I haven't yet got an answer to this one. I do have a couple of families who were onshore when borders closed, subsequently got job offers, and we have submitted applications with expired police certificates. I am hoping that because they were onshore when they expired, that immigration may be lenient, but we don't have a concrete answer either way just yet. So we'll actually have to wait to see until some of these people start moving through the system until we actually get an indication of what Immigration New Zealand is doing. In terms of residence, I have a client who has had new police certificates requested. He can't get them due to lockdowns in his home country. He's onshore here in New Zealand, and they have said that they will simply put his residence application on hold until he can get those new police certificates. So it could be one criteria for work visas and one criteria for residence as well. So we just have to wait and see.
Right, okay. People are obviously getting very concerned as more and more people fall into the unfortunate pool of people who got a visa granted before the lockdown and are not able to enter within 3 months. What do you have to say about this, Julia? We know the government has passed a bill that will allow for activation date to be potentially extended, but do we have any more recent information on this?
Not yet. No, that's the one thing that I know a lot of people are desperate to hear about, because there'll be quite a few of our clients that are sat in that situation. But as yet, no, we're still waiting on that one, and that is being discussed at government level at the moment. So hopefully they'll come up with a solution for that very soon.
Okay. And what about people? We have a message here from Kinevere, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but who might potentially be looking at a student pathway as opposed to a job search trip or landing a job from onshore and going ahead with a work visa. Is a student pathway potentially a good alternative option, Charlotte, to get into New Zealand?
Most definitely. So we think, and it is of course just our opinion, we think international students will be one of the first groups to be allowed to enter. Students are worth approximately $5 billion to our economy every year. So, and our universities rely on them. So it is a good option. The government will be pushing, well, hopefully the government's pushing for them to be allowed to enter, of course, with a 2-week quarantine. I don't think it'll be for July intake. Obviously, that's next month, but potentially September intake. There's been a bit of chat in the industry that could be, the next goalpost to aim for. So if you're interested in a student visa, definitely get in touch. We can most definitely assist you with that. But yeah, it will, at least give you 12 months in the country and potentially a post-study work visa. So definitely worth considering if you can afford it to study here.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Charlotte. We'll do another Facebook Live as soon as we have a bit more information and there's some movement either in policy or in those border restrictions. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. This will be reposted as a recorded video in a few minutes. So if you missed the first part, log back in shortly. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.